Hello, friends. I've been having many conversations with Arab American and Muslim voters across the country in the swing states. These voters are remaining undecided in this election because of the war in the Middle East. The people that I've met with are giving me their time because they know that I was one of the earliest and loudest proponents of a ceasefire and the need to enforce our domestic laws and stop sending funding to Israel that is used to kill innocent civilians in Gaza and Lebanon. I have been publicly and privately critical of the Biden administration for its continuation of the war and its refusal to use our full U.S. leverage to get to a ceasefire and stop the killing. I've been so moved by the honesty and the depth of conversations that I've had with people for me to share why I think electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is our best strategy to change U.S. policy. I am a lifelong organizer who is used to pushing for change that some say is impossible. Our successes have been rooted in building diverse and more powerful coalitions of people united by common vision. My relationship with Muslim and Arab communities goes way back to right after 9/11, when I started an organization to defend the civil liberties of Arab Americans who were being secretly detained, and when I successfully sued the Bush administration for trying to deport Muslims. So, this is a community that I have stood with proudly for decades now, and I care deeply about the community. There is no way to fully give space to the deep anger and grief at the horrors of this war that people have shared with me. Innocent civilians, women, children, elders killed, families destroyed, communities ruined, homes, schools, and hospitals in rubble. And yet, despite that excruciating pain of even losing their family members, the people that I've been meeting with are still wanting to talk about the best choice to make in this election that builds sustained power for our communities. If you care about the war and changing U.S. policy, you also know that there are deeply entrenched interests that are going to resist change, just as has been true throughout our country's history. So to win, we're going to need to build a broad and diverse movement of allies on the outside as well as inside Congress. Black, brown, indigenous, poor, working folks who are all with us in our pro-peace movement. So let's think about what happens with Donald Trump as president. We know what Donald Trump thinks about the Middle East because we saw it during his first term, despite whatever he may say and tell you now. During his first term, Trump empowered Netanyahu. He allowed him to do whatever he wanted, just as he said he would again recently. Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem, and he left the Palestinian people out of any negotiations. He encouraged settlement expansion in the West Bank and made a man who has monetary interests in that expansion the United States ambassador to Israel. A second Trump presidency will be a blank check to Netanyahu to do as he pleases with even more validation from the United States. And remember that unlike in the Democratic Party, where there is a growing resistance to current U.S. policy and funding, there is no one in the Republican Party arguing for resistance to Netanyahu and his extremist ministers, the extreme Israeli government ministers who are currently advocating for killing and expelling all Palestinians. Meanwhile, by attacking all of us with denaturalization efforts, jailing of political opponents, mass deportations, stripping of voting rights, and reproductive freedoms, Trump will set back our organizing movement by years, if not decades. We will all be clambering just to stay on solid ground and protect ourselves with no ability for real organizing. In Congress, he and his extremist cronies will attack and threaten those of us who have been pushing to get justice in the Middle East, while our opponents are just going to get stronger. None of this diminishes the pain and the fear of the current moment and the lack of support from this administration. But the inescapable truth is that our communities have more work to do to build the political power to change U.S. policy towards Israel, especially in an election year. Some of you may be thinking that the best way to build that political power is to vote third party or to sit it out. But I just want to play that through for a minute. Current third-party candidates themselves are saying that their theory of change is to cost Harris the presidency and thereby punish Democrats so that they pay attention to them. I have never seen that theory work. These third-party candidates also do not claim in any way to be building real infrastructure for a multi-party system, the way that Working Families Party is doing, for example. I've said that I wish we had a multi-party democracy, and I intend to continue to work for that. But we don't have one now, and so a vote for a third-party candidate is drawing directly from Harris and benefiting Trump. That is also true when you don't vote at all, given the very thin margins in these races. If Harris loses, our coalition falls apart, and the people who are punished will include the very allies that we need to build a stronger movement. That sows divisiveness, not strength or power or coalition. And Trump, once again, will be empowered to do the most cruel and horrific things that hurt all of our communities, with no additional power for Muslim and Arab American communities, and certainly no ability to stop this war. I wish that Vice President Harris would be clearer on where she stands, even if it may be difficult for her to distance herself from President Biden, given that she's his vice president. At the same time, I do look at what she has said, and there are things that give me comfort that we will have room to organize with her in the presidency. She skipped Netanyahu's speech in Congress. She does not have a 50-year history with Netanyahu as Joe Biden has, and she has repeatedly been far more explicit about the human suffering in Gaza. Just 2 months after October 7th, 2023, she gave a detailed speech in Dubai, calling for a ceasefire and making clear that she would not accept the forced displacement of Gaza or reoccupation or siege or blockade of Gaza. She made clear that she wants to focus on day-after plans, reconstructing Gaza and ensuring governance driven by the will of the Palestinian people. She has reaffirmed multiple times that Palestinians have a right to dignity and self-determination. And importantly, a President Harris will not jail those who disagree with her the way that President Trump will. And we can continue to build our influence to push her to seek the outcomes that we seek. I also want to say that while I'm only speaking here about the war, Kamala Harris has been part of an administration that we worked very closely with on domestic economic policy to take on climate change, invest in Black, Brown, Indigenous, and poor communities across the country, take on big pharma in negotiating drug prices for the first time, and canceling student debt for over 5 million borrowers. So we do have experience with her, and we have so much more to do to make huge investments in housing, universal childcare, healthcare, education, and taking on price gouging, not to mention passing critical abortion and voting rights protections. Donald Trump will do none of these things. Perfection is never on the ballot, but real, true progress is. Our democracy is on the line. And so my plea to everyone who's undecided is not to deny anyone's pain, but to join with others who are also in pain and to pick the choice that allows us to build sustained power and protects the rights of the coalition that we will need to end the suffering. I hope you'll consider these factors and make your decision to vote for Kamala Harris. Return the gavels to us in the House and the Senate, and then help us organize like hell to get real policy change through. Thank you so much for listening.